So, listen to this, winning the Champions League with Porto is a fairy tale. Winning with the Inter-team where most players are closer to retirement than their prime is unbelievable. However, most consider Mourinho's time at Chelsea to be the most impressive. But how can it be? Well, it's easy to forget. In fact, Mourinho himself warned everyone that he would forgotten. Said, in 4 or 5 years, no one will remember that I was a Chelsea player-manager. This will become normal, meaning what he built will become the new normal. In reality, that would be the death of him. But let's focus on the bright side first. Back in 2003, billionaire Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea, hired Ranieri, and handed it over to him. Transfer budget of 170 million euros. At the time it was out of this world, and still is after all. Their only goal is to win the Premier League. It's been 50 years since then. The last time they won it, Chelsea weren't even thinking about the Champions League, because they have enough problems back home. Because even with that amount of money, Ranieri didn't win anything, not a single trophy. And to make Abramovich even more desperate, the season went on like that became when Arsenal, their city rivals, won the league right under their noses without lost a match. Known as the Invincible, do you know how difficult it is to defeat someone who is invincible? That's impossible, and they really can't spend any more money than they already spent, so the only alternative is to find someone very, very special. Dare I say something special? Abramovich does not like Mourinho, thinking he is too arrogant, too blunt, too scandalous and so lavish, but he hates losing. He's desperate and Mourinho has charisma. So, just 3 days after introducing himself to the world by winning the Champions League with Porto, Mourinho went to Chelsea. Determined to turn around a squad he considered a mess loser, become a champion, and the first step is simple. They lack personality, so Mourinho has to make up for that, and heaven knows he has already done so. Had a lot to spare, but once in London, it all fell apart, and in his first press conference, he uttered the most iconic line ever spoken by a manager. We have top players, and sorry if I'm arrogant. We have a top manager, please don't call me arrogant, but I'm European champion and I think I'm someone special. Some people see this and think it's just a facade. Surely this rookie manager can't be like this confident in himself, but he really, when he entered the new dressing room for the first time, he sat the players down and told them the exact date they would win the tournament. April 30th, 2005, Wyatt Bolton. Keep that in mind. And then, before the players had enough time to criticize his incredible audacity, he went on to name all the players on the team who had won any major trophy. Not much. Makelele, the exception, had arrived the previous year as Ranieri's star signing and had won all 3 major international club titles as well as La Liga, twice. But other than him, Gallas won the League Cup and the rest are all miserable. John Terry, 24, already has an FA Cup to his name and didn't even get to play in the final. Gudjohnsen, 26, is at the peak of his career, winning the Eredivisie. The same aptly esto Arjen Robben, 21, who was signed mid-season and is still recovering from a hamstring injury. Even 27-year-old Frank Lampard, soon to be the team's star, hasn't even won a minor trophy. The obvious thing to do here is to spend money on some of the series winners like Makelele, follow Ranieri's approach and hope for the best, but Mourinho has never been one to accept the safest route, so instead, he terminated the contracts of 9 players, letting them they all left for free, and these are the players he brought in. A 22-year-old goalkeeper from Rennes who has never won a trophy. His name is Per Cech. The 24-year-old midfielder comes from Benfica with the only trophy of his career to his name is Thiago. And above all, the 27-year-old striker from Marseille, who has never won a title and is playing in the French 2nd division just 2 years earlier. His name is Didier Drogba. Even the 2 players he bought actually won something. Paulo Ferreira and Ricardo Carvalho, both were bought from his previous club Porto, and before meeting him they were both of them don't have titles like the rest. It sounds stupid, but back then, Chelsea was a losing team. So, to end his famous first dressing room speech, Mourinho told them, I am the champion. If you follow me, I will make you a champion too. Again, that sounds humble boasting, maybe not even being humble, but in reality, he chose his words very well. Careful, or at least he chose players who were susceptible to this message. Warriors, as Lampard eventually told the press, on one of Mourinho's first days at the club. Lampard was taking a shower. Mourinho walked in and told him, you are the best player in the team. World. Lampard was caught off guard. After all, he was completely naked and Mourinho said so again and added, "But you have to win trophies." All right, Lampard admits that moment was the spark in his head that gave him permission to take it all to the next level. Not to spoil the story, but next year, Lampard finished second in the Ballon d'Or. That's how things affect things. Mourinho said he had his players. By the end of the transfer market, the squad had been overhauled, and although Mourinho had spent an unusually large amount of money, but he still tried to spend less. Ranieri, and so the season begins. His first opponent was none other than Sir Alex Ferguson, the world's greatest coach. Tournament history. One man called Mourinho cocky after watching his presentation, but was also the last to admit that when Mourinho arrived in the Premier League, other managers were stuck, playing catch-up, which was far ahead of his time. He was, regardless, his first trial by fire would end after 15 minutes with a goal from Gudjonsson. Then 8 games into the season, Chelsea ranked second, 2 points away from the top of the table. Buttonly once won a match by more than 1 goal difference. So much so that it seems impossible to score against them. Mourinho's safety-first approach has received widespread praise because the match received a lot of criticism. Some even called it boring, but Chelsea still haven't played Mourinho wanted them to be, and that was only after suffering their first defeat in the Championship season that it all clicks. You see, afterwards, Wenger sarcastically said that Chelsea must have lost their beliefs, and Mourinho clearly didn't like that, and God knows what he said to me. Players, but from then on Chelsea boringly continued their streak of scoring 4 goals in 6 of the next 9 matches, taking the top spot from Arsenal and 5 points ahead of, leading Mourinho to attack Wenger, telling the press that he believed he had a person who has a fetish for observing others, says, "I think he's a voyeur. He likes to watch the others. There are some people who have a large telescope at home to observe happened in other houses." He talked and talked and talked about Chelsea. It's one thing to do when you're at your peak, but when it's game 11 and you haven't won an away game yet, when you can only win when Henry plays, maybe he should worried about my team, but it's Chelsea, Chelsea, Chelsea. I'm starting worried that he wanted my job, just like that. After 4 months in England, the confrontation between Sir Alex and Wenger has been pushed out of the limelight. Mourinho is everyone's favorite character and shows, and in January after the win over Tottenham, the players boarded the bus when they received the news came that Arsenal lost to Bolton, leaving them 8 points ahead. In the hands of Mourinho said, the bus turned into a circus, and in the words of Wenger, from that moment we turned their hope into faith, then into faith. In other words, that is from that moment on, he knew he had lost the tournament. It was funny to see how quickly he retracted his words, and of course Mourinho did not hesitate to tease. The press watched another Arsenal beat that. At first I didn't like Arsenal, now I love them. Everything they lost points at the weekend. However, after being kicked into the stands for fighting Liverpool fans, he still thought they went to the League Cup. It's time for him to face the club he hates the most, the club that rejected him. It's time to face Barcelona in the round of 16 of the Champions League, with Rijkaard at the helm. Many people expect the match to have Barcelona's continuous efforts to break down Terry and Carvalho's defensive wall with a champagne football match. So before the other team had a chance to feel as though they were on top, Mourinho first criticized Rijkaard. His player history is great, mine is 0, but as a manager he is incomparable, because he has no titles and I have many there, and then proceeds to list the 11 players he will start with, ending all speculation. Just before echoed the names of 11 players that he knew Rijkaard would start, stood up and left the room. If that isn't mind games, then I don't know what could be. But his goal never hurt or scared his opponents. He always thought about his own team, his Warriors, and these moments are only intended to arouse a siege mentality, because when the Warriors feel they are under attack, they attack harder than ever. And well, after a strange match with Balletti's own goal, Drogba was sent to fan Maxi Lopez, of all people, turned the match around in under 6 minutes. Results was determined to be a 2-1 defeat, but it was Mourinho who had to smile complacently. During the post-match press conference, Mourinho shocked everyone by accusing Rijkaard of leaving into the referee's dressing room during the first half, hinting that Drogba might have been sent off as a result of that. In the end, Mourinho would completely stun Barcelona in the second leg, taking the lead 3-0 in less than 20 minutes, eventually beating them 4-2, despite being outnumbered. Ownership, however, even this victory was not enough to calm the media storm he created with his comments in the previous weeks, and it all culminated in the referee having to retire early, Anders Frisk at 42, amid death threats from Chelsea fans. However, Mourinho could not escape this situation and scathed as UEFA called him a guy nemes of football, and banned him from entering the stadium for both of their matches against Bayern Munich in the next round. That still didn't stop him, as Mourinho admitted years later to staying inside change from midday until game time so he can still talk top players before the game started, and then literally left in a basket. In the film was watched by UEFA officials while he was in the basket, and finish at it was so tight he could barely breathe. this guy, regardless. Chelsea eventually beat Bayern 4-2 in the same match and progressed. Semi-finals, but before that, well, that day finally came, April 30, 2005, away at Bolton. Lampard scored twice, Chelsea won the match and won the English Championship after 50 minutes. Years, just as Mourinho predicted, it turns out that after all he is not just special, he ices a prophet. However, there are some things he cannot deliver. Had to face Liverpool in the semi-finals of the Champions League. The draw ended slow and tense as possible, and unfortunately for Mourinho that goal was scored by Liverpool. The reality that hurt Mourinho the most was the truth that the ball never actually crossed the line. In his perfect year, Mourinho was eliminated from the Champions League by a virtual goal. Yeah, it's not pretty at all. However, as the tournament draws to a close, Mourinho is in his first year in the Premier League football, took Chelsea to 95 points, more than any team has ever achieved, while conceding only 15 goals, fewer than anyone in history. Mourinho has taken his superstar status to a new level. It's hard to doubt that he is the most marketable manager in the sport. More infamous, more beloved, more hated more than anyone else. Nothing encapsulates this better than something I've heard one The Sun journalist said. Mourinho is probably the only man for whom I left my husband because he is also the only man my husband will leave me for. But no matter what, with the season over, it's time to start over, and very quickly things start to look different. You can almost tell how quickly it's going to happen. Crumble. However, the transfer market still begins. First and foremost, he brought in a certain box-to-box midfielder from Lyon, named Michael Essien. Well, he only paid £1 million for a 20-year-old defensive midfielder was discovered in the French second division. His name is Lassana Diarra. He also brought along Sean Wright Phillips, son of the legendary Ian Wright, as Del Horno and Scott Sinclair. With these updates on the squad, he entered the season with a win over Arsenal for Community Shield and continuing what he built last season, getting it all the road to the 25th day of competition was with only one defeat, 15 points ahead of the second-place team, People Unite. However, cup competitions did not go as expected, especially in the Champions League where Rijkaard took revenge with a victory over Chelsea in the last 16 round, prompting Mourinho to again hint that they had been robbed, saying, "When we played 11 versus 11, they didn't beat us." In the end, Chelsea won the title again, with Mourinho celebrating by throwing a threw-us victory medal into the crowd, was given another and threw that one too, but amidst the cheers, you could hear the noise. Some started asking for more. Them focused on failure in Europe rather than on success domestically, and at the time the third season comes, you can feel the pressure in the air. And so his previous disagreements with Abramovich began to become more severe, and the media began to pay attention about that, and suddenly there are rumors that Mourinho could leave the club. Regardless, one thing seems clear, Mourinho does not have 100% control over his team, and perhaps that explains why that summer Chelsea seemed to have let go of Mourinho. Transfer of philosophies, as if they had signed the likes of Kalou, John Obi Mikel and Bolarouz, the three young players that I'm sure Mourinho has had a hand in. They seem to have had a hand in Tuchel's gone back to signing established players who are already winners. They got it. Ballack, at the time, one of the key figures at Bayern, Shevchenko, a personal friend of Abramovich, who was actually a Ballon d'Or winner at AC Milan, and even Ashley Cole, who not necessarily the most prestigious player, but considering they're taking him directly from their rivals in one of the most controversial transfers of the decade, I feel as if it fits the story. I guess the takeaway from this is that they put Mourinho in a difficult position, so that he has no excuse for any defeat in Europe, but then things get complicated. In the Premier League, with the explosion of Cristiano Ronaldo, Man United took charge, won the championship from Chelsea, giving Mourinho his first season without a championship. 5 years later, Shevchenko simply became one of the most notorious losers of all time. With Drogba has stepped up to the next level and made his singing sound rushed and redundant. I know Mourinho must have rubbed it in Abramovich's face, as he is known to disapprove of his actions. Signed, and although Chelsea have won both domestic cups, it means Mourinho has won every trophy available. Cup in England. In the championship they were once again defeated by Liverpool in the semi-finals, this time on penalties, and from the moment the whistle blew you know disaster is coming. It can be seen that Mourinho is increasingly frustrated with Chelsea's strict hierarchy. Their noses into his business and into Avram Grant, a man Mourinho clearly dislikes, appointed director of football at the club. Things have reached a new level for Mourinho. Even told the press, "If Roman Abramovich helped me train, we would be at the bottom of the table off the league, and if I had to work in his world of big business, we'd go bankrupt." Regardless, he went into his fourth season, hoping for the best, but suddenly has received his lowest transfer budget since arriving at the club, and despite having much to offer, names like Anelka, Pizarro, Maluda, and Ivanovic arrived that summer. After just 8 games, Chelsea won 3, drew 4, and lost 1, so an emergency meeting was held, and both sides agreed it was best for him to leave the club. The fans did not happily. This player literally cried when he received the news. Even Mourinho admitted to crying. After he left, it became clear that some members of the board were indeed under toxic influence. To Abramovich, with Avram Grant, the director who had opposed Mourinho, named as their next manager and didn't win a single trophy that season. When Mourinho finally mentioned this chapter, he simply told the press, "No eggs, no omelets. It's a sad ending to a story with the best beginning, but it had to be done. This time the grass on the other side is actually a darker green."